U.S. trade policy is already playing a role in this presidential election, as the leading Republican candidate, Donald Trump, is calling for an across-the-board tariff of 10% on goods imported from all countries, and potentially much higher from China. Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Romer of Boston College takes us through the economic effects of tariffs.
I think we need a more nuanced view, and it's really one that goes all the way back to the origins of my work, distinguishing ideas from objects. And what we want to do is encourage as much flow of ideas around the world as we can, but we don't need to worry so much about the flows of objects, because we don't get very much benefit out of the trade in the objects, and as I'll describe, there's some costs associated with those.
I think historically, economists have told us that free trade is really valuable to growing the economy, that you have comparative advantage in order to really grow an economy. If you actually do cut back on free trade, do you have to give up growth in the economy?
No. So you don't have to give up the growth, because it's the trade in ideas which is essential for faster growth. So, for example, if you got a firm that invents like a better pharmaceutical in the United States, you want them to be able to earn royalties on that all over the world, because the returns to innovation will be higher and they'll discover more things. But that doesn't mean that the pill has to be manufactured in the United States. The firm can get the royalties just on the intellectual property and have it manufactured anywhere. To give you another example, during the 70s, Japan had gotten better at making cars according to these zero defect, quality control standards. And we came to an agreement with Japan where we said, Toyota, Honda, those companies, they can come and manufacture cars in the United States. So the ideas that they had developed, they could earn a profit on, and U.S. consumers could get the benefits of higher quality cars. But we still had cars that were manufactured by workers in the United States. And that's the advantage of some kind of restrictions on the trade in goods, is that we can actually protect the jobs and the incomes for the people who, unfortunately, for the last 2 decades have really been left behind.
One of the concerns repeated most frequently about tariffs is the effect that they may have on economic growth overall, even if they do save some jobs.
I don't think there's any debate among serious economists. From a macroeconomic standpoint, trade is good. Therefore, moving against trade is bad in terms of the impact on the overall economy. Whether we go into a crash and depression, I'm not sure I would predict that, but it's bad. On a micro level, the problem with free trade, so to speak, is that there were jobs lost. The opening of China into the WTO unabashedly, unquestionably caused us manufacturing jobs. But the overall economy was better. Everything you and I bought was cheaper and better because it was made in China. And yeah, we can reverse all that. We can ban television sets and bicycles from China, and the consequences would be not, I don't think, disastrous, but they would be noticeably bad.
The way to cut it is high school educated versus college educated people. And if you look at something like life expectancy, high school educated people are dying younger. They're dying from these deaths of despair. If you look at employment, the average adult, the average number of adults who have a job in the United States has gone down, mostly because the people who are high school educated have such miserable prospects that some of them have given up. The rest are staying there in the market, but they're really suffering. So life expectancy, willingness to work, I mean, these are the kinds of underlying indicators that tell us life is not getting better. It's getting worse for a large fraction of the people here in the United States. And we got to think about, what do we do to give them a growth prospect like the rest of us have, the college educated have? What will make it so that they can see progress in their lives, and even progress where their children will do better than they did?
It's not just goods that the United States imports from abroad. It also welcomes capital investment, as Nippon Steel seeks even now to invest in U.S. steel, something the Biden administration is carefully reviewing.
This is a test for the Biden administration. Has their commitment to resilience and industrial policy been a serious commitment based on a desire to strengthen and make more resilient the economy? Or is it a cloak for protectionist pandering to traditional industries with no genuine national security rationale. There is no remotely plausible national security rationale for questioning the Nippon-U.S. Steel transaction. Japan is a staunch ally. The production will continue to take place in the United States. The result will be the infusion of more capital into the U.S. steel industry. The result will be lower priced steel as an input when 100 times as many U.S. workers are in industries that use steel as are in the steel industry itself. So this should be a layup for policymakers who have the right motivations. And if it's not, it is a sign of very troubling economic nationalism on the part of the United States.
I think foreign investment is by far the most important vector for moving ideas around the world. There's licensing, there's intellectual property, but it's really foreign, it's firms that carry ideas. So Nippon Steel could bring its ideas in about how to make steel better, more efficient methods. That's just like Toyota and Honda had these ideas about quality control, which interestingly were ideas developed by a professor in the United States, Deming, but nobody in the United States would listen to him. So he took the ideas to Japan, they developed them, they turned out to be fantastically important, and then we got them back through the direct foreign investment by those firms. So we definitely want us both to protect our firms' ability to go earn a return in other countries in the world, but also we want to fight for that. We also want to fight for the ability for the foreign firms that have good ideas to come and supply them to workers and consumers in the United States.
So you're an economist, of course. You're not a national security expert. How does national security cut across this potential? Because there are concerns that some investment, foreign investment, particularly from some rivals, if not enemies, rivals into some U.S. industries, could actually undermine our national security.
Yeah, I think people are like barking up the wrong tree here. I think that what we should really be thinking about on national security is we want to make critical security technology goods like chips in the United States so that if things get really bad, we control the supply. And we want to make things like masks, like for the next pandemic in the United States. And we've gotten ourselves in a position where we are not self-sufficient in chips or masks. So those are the things we need to invest in, and if necessary, put tariff barriers, because it'll be a little more expensive to produce them here, but put tariff barriers or subsidize, one way or the other, make it profitable for firms to make those kind of goods here. We're doing that some with chips. I don't think we're doing it as much as we should with the medical technologies. But then moving out from the security sensitive areas and the kind of emergency areas, we should be thinking about a way to make sure that there's a demand for these high school educated individuals to get a job in a factory that pays a wage, and pays a wage which is higher than the wage that a worker gets in Vietnam. And to make that attractive for the firm to hire the U.S. worker instead of the worker in Vietnam, we're going to have either subsidies or tariff barriers. And if I can, I just want to say that this could get us back to the system that worked for us in the 20th century. Because what we did was we reduced the number of high school educated individuals because a lot of people were getting college education. There was still a demand for those high school educated people in manufacturing. So a reduction in supply, same demand, wages were going up. So both the people who got more education got higher wages, but the people who didn't get more education got higher wages because they were becoming more scarce. That all fell apart with globalization, where instead of hiring more expensive high school educated workers in the United States, firms just went anywhere in the world to chase the lowest wages. So this is going to be like a big food fight, I think, in the profession. But I think we have to get serious about the reality of this and not just keep talking about, well, We'll find a way to share the gains if we engage in trade. We've had 20 years, and we haven't done any sharing of the gains with those people who are so depressed and miserable and discouraged. So let's go back to what worked in the 20th century.
Whatever the merits of free trade or protectionism, it is not at all certain how much difference the presidential election will have, given the positions of the leading candidates.
What do you mean by a free trade agreement, right? Do you mean the traditional kind of U.S. approach to a very, very comprehensive, maximally liberalizing, aggressively liberalizing agreement? We're not doing that with anybody right now. It's actually insensitive to the dynamics in the global economy and the U.S. economy right now to push on with that program, which may have been fit for the 80s and the 90s. Maybe it was starting to show its age in the 2000s and 2010s. It's 2023. We need new policies.
Both gentlemen have shown that they are both protectionist. Of course, President Biden has kept on the tariffs that President Trump had imposed on China. I do think, though, that there will be some changes, particularly if Trump is elected. What he has already said on the campaign trail is this 10% flat, tariff on all imports. I think there's a real question: does he have the legal or statutory ability to do that? If you actually go back to President Nixon's administration, he did that same thing in 1971. He put an 10% import surcharge on all imports. Now, we'll sort of see what happens. A lot of lip service doesn't necessarily translate into reality.
I think both the Democrats and the Republicans are moving away from this kind of obsession about extreme free trade. There are some advantages to some restrictions on trade, and we've just got to think about what are the parts that matter versus what are the parts that don't matter. And I think the Biden administration's been a little bit more thoughtful, or at least I'm hopeful they'll be more thoughtful about continuing to support the direct foreign investment, even as they try and subsidize the chip manufacturing.